You offered.
It's pretty hard to follow the previous member's speech, but I pay tribute to her and the actions that she's taken in the last couple of days. It takes a huge amount of courage to do what she's done, and also the actions that she's taken since being first elected in 2010. Now, Mr. Speaker, I have a large Jewish community in my constituency, and as such, the work of the CST is particularly important. And in fact, I called for this debate after the release of the figures by the Community Security Trust. I pay tribute to them and the work that they do, the selfless action in looking after the community, and I was very pleased that my first parliamentary question here in this place was actually to ask for money to pay them to look after school children at their schools. The Honourable Member for Surrey, Heath, agreed with me at the time that he didn't see why parents should have to pay to keep their children safe just by going to school, and we continue to fund that work. But several honourable members have mentioned the 1,652 anti-Semitic incidents in the last year. But that's not the whole story. There were further 630 reports of potential incidents, but they weren't included by the CST because there was no evidence of anti-Semitic motivation, targeting or content. But many of those people that suffered those incidents were actually from the Jewish faith. Now, previously, we have seen spikes when there's been military action in Israel or conflict in Gaza or even on some extent in the West Bank. But in the last year, that hasn't occurred as such. There has been some skirmishes on the border where people have been killed, but there are two particular periods that stand out where there's been a spike in anti-Semitic incidents. The first was in April to May last year. And that was the time when the CST indicated that there were an additional number of incidents. And it also coincided with the time when the leader, the Right Honourable Member for Islington and Leader of the Opposition, his past support for a mural in Tower Hamlets actually came to prominence. So the so-called graffiti artist called Mir One, who many of us will remember, produced a mural showing people which very much looked like elderly Jewish men sitting on a table on the backs of African Caribbean, presumably slaves. And there were many comments made at the time, and as I said, that coincided with an increased amount of incidents. The second one was again in August to September, and this surrounded the time when there was a lot of media discussion about whether the Labour Party would adopt the International Holocaust Remembrance Association definition. And during that time, the number of anti-Semitic incidents went up to 150 in that particular month. I certainly didn't want this debate to be about particularly criticising the Labour Party per se, but I would like the Labour Party to take back that when people make comments, there is an effect beyond just coverage received in the newspapers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I've listened very carefully to everything said today. And can I assure my colleagues on the Labour benches that we on this side really support you and feel very, very deeply that you are not anti-Semitic as a whole. And we are very sad that this is happening.
While that wasn't a question, I believe, directed directly to me, what I will say is that for some time I've been asked in hustings, in elections, is the Labour Party anti-Semitic? And I've never really engaged in that debate, because, and the simple reason I can't is because my right honourable friend for Enfield is certainly not anti-Semitic, and she is very much a part of the Labour Party, as indeed many other people are. So I've always resisted saying that the Labour Party is anti-Semitic. I've resisted saying that the Leader of the Opposition is anti-Semitic. I will let others make their mind up about that. In a very good book, which I found in the library by Anthony Julius, The Trials of the Diaspora, A History of Anti-Semitism in England, he suggests that there's been 4 periods in the United Kingdom where Jews have been prominent and have received anti-Semitic abuse. I would now say there's probably a 5th period, and that's the period that we're now living through. The anti-Semitism of recent years has been one that took the form of criticism of Zionism and the actions and the policies of the government of Israel. And that often manifested itself through direct actions such as the boycott, divestment and sanctions movement. But now the new line of attack is not that traditional form of anti-Semitism with the hatred of Jewish people per se, by claiming that Jews are inferior to others, or belief in the worldwide Jewish conspiracy and their control of capitalism. The new anti-Semitism differs from also the political voices in which it comes from. Previously, it had been from the political right. The new anti-Semites are primarily on the left, or indeed on the far left. But one concern that I have is how that these views are actually communicated to the public and to other people, and that is through the use of social media. The Anti-Semitism Policy Trust and the CST found that when Google removed "Are Jews Evil" from its autocomplete function in December 2016, 10% fewer people searched "Are Jews Evil" than had done in the previous year. So we now must seek that search companies should stop directing people to anti-Semitic comment upon the internet, and we need to better equip both users and indeed remove the content when it is uploaded. The Honourable Member for Bassetlaw and myself visited Dublin with the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Anti-Semitism, where we visited both Facebook and Twitter. And I'm sure he'll remember that when we spoke to Facebook, their reaction to any kind of racist, sexist, homophobic, misogynistic comment was, "We must remove it as soon as possible." However, when we spoke to Twitter, they likened any such comments as to a comment made in the street as you pass someone by. And so we felt that certainly was not an appropriate response. And I would like to see the government and the Department for Culture, Media and Sport actually looking at legislation to prevent these kind of these comments being allowed to remain online. Yesterday, I was particularly disappointed by two comments that many of us will have seen online. The first one was in response to my right honourable friend from Enfield when she moved to her current position as an independent member. And the Young Labour group tweeted, "Joan Ryan gone, Palestinian lives," as though she has any effect upon either Palestine, the West Bank, Gaza or Israel. The second comment, and I'm not going to name the member because I don't think it's necessary, but it was about the financial backers of the new independent group. And the comment was, "Support from the State of Israel, which supports both Conservative and Labour Friends of Israel, of which Luciana was chair, is possible, and I would not condone those who suggest it." Well, Mr. Speaker, I certainly would. I can't say for Labour Friends of Israel, but I'm sure it's the same as the Conservative Friends of Israel. They do not receive any money from the Israeli government. They receive their finances within this country as per the law. So I would say to the Labour front bench, I would ask them to do more, not only with the members that I've mentioned today and the comments that they've put online, but they need to actively seek out those people who are causing so many of my residents a terrible and emotional time. The Honourable Lady for Liverpool Wavertree has shown us today what anti-Semitism feels like. But many of my constituents show me on an almost daily basis how it affects them. And one particular comment, which I will end on, came from a gentleman today that said, like me, he was very concerned with the removal of a passport from a British person. He said, and though I don't agree with him, he said, if Mr. Corbyn was to be elected, he would know that I have the right to return to Israel, and no doubt I would have my passport taken away. Now, I don't believe that, and I certainly would hope that we never end up in a country that behaves in such a way. But I would say to the House today that we can't go on like this. We can't allow people to behave in the way that they have, and we must surely stop it before people do leave this country.